Welcome back for another episode of Gigi Says What Now. I'm your host, Genevieve Farrell, but my friends call me Gigi. I do hope you will hit that subscribe button and be my friend. This Follow the Money is a series where we do deep dives into the world of the predatory class using the Epstein files to do so. Until those files turn into trials. You know what I'm saying? Um, I am usually okay. So usually I read to you off of my manuscripts, which don't always end up being exactly the same as my finished product, whether it's for my Gigi Says What Nows or for my Fantasy Fiction Fridays. Today I am going to read to you directly from my Substack. My Substacks do tend to go up a bit sooner than I have the opportunity to like sit down and film, partially because I don't really have the opportunity, and also partially because I don't really have the tech to make as high quality videos as I would like to. Also, I would rather just write. I write all the time. I have calluses on my fingers. Last night I went to bed literally dizzy from just reading article after article after article and research for the next article that I'm working on. Um, so yeah, if you want to get a jump ahead, join my Substack. It's not behind a paywall. Genevieve Gravel is the name. The government wouldn't do that. Promise. The youth of today has grown up in a post 9/11 world with no remembrance of the way things used to be, only experiencing the age of innocence lost. For dinosaurs like me, I remember a time when lives were just as chaotic as they are today. However, the way we experienced the world was through a lens of innocence. We were born into a time where Nazis were the bad guys and the hands of justice moved at a glacial pace. We all had a TV or two, one for the living room and one in our parents' bedroom. We talked for hours on our landlines and cooked our frozen meals with microwaves. We received our news from the same sources, the nightly news or the morning paper. We were all collectively fed the same content, the same stories from the same sources. And thanks to the fairness doctrine, there was some sense of trust in the media to bring us fair and in-depth stories without bias, informing us of the world in which we live. This was not the information age. We were on the outliers. Our generation was growing up with technology that was rapidly advancing like a speeding bullet towards the computer age. And while computers did exist, most homes did not have one, and we certainly did not have one in our pockets. We talked about the trending topic of the month with our friends and co-workers around the water cooler. And most government agencies, like the criminal justice system, used good old pen and paper. Office workers used typewriters with carbon copies. Our data was stored in filing cabinets, one would hope behind lock and key. Even the three-letter agencies, it was commonplace to not have a PC on every desk, just an ashtray, a whiskey glass, and a placard. It was the 1970s. Despite the wake of Vietnam and the lies exposed with in-depth reporting, the assassination of MLK told in black and white, and Nixon corruption with Watergate, there was still honor and blind trust given to our elected officials. We were waking up, but we were still not in the know. And with that, most conspiracy theories were considered fringe. They still existed on the edge of our consciousness, where they were easy to ignore and even easier to deny. A time when the belief of Area 51 and the existence of extraterrestrial beings was enough to label one as insane. And while rumors and innuendos were spoken of, only the most salacious of stories were told as fringe, and the most common belief believing our government would not do that. In the late 1970s, a man by the name of Bill Hamilton developed a software called PROMIS, an acronym for Prosecutors Management Information System, a case management software developed by Inslaw Inc., a nonprofit formed in 1973, built with government funding and made public. PROMIS was built using only 16 bits. The software was slow by today's standards, but efficient and effective. It was designed to help prosecutors and law enforcement agencies track and manage criminal cases. In 1981, Inslaw would transition to the private sector, becoming a for-profit entity. PROMIS was updated to 62 bits, now faster and keeping up with the times that were rapidly expanding and becoming more accessible and user-friendly to the average everyday person. More importantly, the Hamiltons now owned the software. In 1982, the former NSA agent Bill Hamilton would broker a deal with the United States government for $10 million to install the updated software into government agencies across the country. The application was kept under the watchful eye of the DOJ. The agent who received the case was a former Inslaw's general counselor by the name of Madison Brewer, who had been pushed out of Inslaw and harbored a little resentment towards Bill Hamilton as a result. Now, okay, let's keep it real. Let's tell it like it was. Brewer was big mad, and he was going to stop at nothing to make Bill Hamilton's working life a living hell. And he was so good at being bad that Inslaw would be forced into bankruptcy in 1985. Now, Bill Hamilton, he wasn't having that, so he was like, "No way, this guy is going to steal my intellectual property." Like, F you, Brewer, and F the DOJ too. So he filed suit. And the judge in the case agreed with Bill Hamilton, finding that the DOJ had stolen PROMIS by way of trickery, fraud, and deceit, awarding Inslaw $65 million. The DOJ appealed, as is their right to do, and they lost again. A 3-year investigation would ensue, only for Congress to agree with the court's findings. The DOJ had stolen the software outright. The legal battle and the controversy around it spanned over 2 decades. Among the official findings in 1982, the House Judiciary Committee report expressed concern that the software was distributed for intelligence purposes. The government, to this day, continues to deny these claims. Then acting AG Bill Barr failed to file any charges. In this case, he stonewalled and he stalled. So Bill Barr, he was the AG under George W. Bush from 91 to 93, after working for the CIA from 71 to 77. And he was then the advisor on domestic policy under Ronald Reagan from 82 to 83. He would serve at the pleasure of the president again as AG under Donald Trump from 2019 to 2020. Inslaw does still exist today as an IT vendor in both legal and non-legal sectors, with tech and products like Docket Track and Jail Track. But PROMIS is long outdated and has been replaced with software called Lions. It's a much more productive code, but PROMIS's legacy still lives on. The software, PROMIS software, would prove to be absolutely revolutionary, and not just in expediting the legal process either. Now, listen, I love a good conspiracy theory, though I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I enjoy looking at it at a historical, what do we know now about theories of yesteryear, and how can we debunk them? I think that's fun. It's fun for me. It's getting a lot harder to do that these days. All right. So right now we're going to get into a little bit of conspiracy theory. And enter a man named Michael Risciuto. We're just going to call him MR because I'm not 100% sure I'm pronouncing his name right. Remember, with me, I learned from reading, so my dyslexic brain doesn't always make the right sounds when it comes to names or words that I haven't, memorized. So, MR, he was by all means like a wicked genius. He was a post-World War II baby born in 47 or 48. He would be publicly recognized for his intelligence by the age of 12, when a local news outlet would call him a modern Da Vinci. By the summer of 1964, after completing his freshman year of high school, he built and lived in an underwater house complete with a television and a radio. Jeffrey Epstein also had a fascination for underwater structures. His plans for Great St. James included an underwater office. I mean, I'm just saying. Um, but what a great surveillance tool to avoid, being detected from the sky and remain hidden. And there was a trapdoor that was featured in the DOJ's Epstein files. There was a picture that showed a trapdoor that led to a flooded room. Um, and after there was this post on 4chan that the poster claimed that they were an employee of Jeffrey Epstein, and they had been down a trapdoor that led to an underground dungeon. And there was another one of Epstein's victims who had claimed to had been led down into a room that would very much match the description, only using much more innocent language. Some believe that the hatch was pictured in the picture in the DOJ files was like the entrance to that dungeon that these two people had described, or that it was possible tunnels that had been flooded to cover up Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. Others believe it may be a dock for a submarine. While Jeffrey Epstein didn't own a submarine, him and his partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, who had a submarine license, they had access to one that was attached to a yacht that they would often borrow, that was called the Plan B. So I don't know, just something to go down there. We don't really know everything that happened on Great St. James, Little St. James. We certainly don't know anything that happened on Zorro Ranch, and if the DOJ has their way, we probably never will. And we also don't know much about his Paris apartment either. But anyway, I digress. Back to MR, okay? So after constructing an argon laser, which is a laser that emanates like a blue-green beam of intense light, these lasers are most commonly used in the world of medicine today. But he built one, like just in his living room, or I don't know, underground in his little water basement. I don't know. But he built one. And as a result, he would be invited to work as a lab assistant at Stanford with a Dr. Shallett in the physics department. He was 16. And the U.S. Navy actually offered him college scholarships. Like I said, this guy was wicked smart. And that is a fact. Like, are you kidding me? Anyway, MR claims that he gained access to Inslaw's PROMIS through his work at Hardin Inc., which was a tech firm that was involved with intelligent contracts. And at Hardin, MR would work for an Earl Bryan, who was a close associate with Ronald Reagan. So Earl Bryan, he had been awarded PROMIS's source code. MR claims that he installed a back door into Inslaw's PROMIS. And this back door, this hack, would allow for the U.S. government's three-letter agencies, including the DOJ and the NSA, as well as Israeli intelligence, to be allowed to spy on foreign entities that the software had been sold to, leaving behind the cats and the pigeons. The U.S. government would now have a way to spy on foreign agents undetected and remotely, ushering in the computer age of surveillance. Okay, so this all made me think of Stephanie Harlow on YouTube. She did an incredible deep dive into the missing and passed away scientists and their connections to Jeffrey Epstein in a multi-part series. And one, she talks about the Phantom program and the Pegasus program, and how the government uses those programs to gain access to personal devices to gain intel. I mean, you should totally check it out. You should check her out. 10 out of 10. Highly recommend her channel, especially if you are a true crime girly. She focuses more on true crime but I mean, like everything we're looking into in the Epstein files is all true crime too, isn't it? Anyway, back to our regular scheduled programming. Early 1980s, MR had worked as a computer and electronics expert on covert weapons. He operated a research facility with joint research security firm called Wackenhut Corp. I don't know where they come up with these names. But Wackenhut developed stuff like night vision goggles, explosives, and bio and chemical weapons. And their facility was hosted on the Camazon reservation in Indio, California. Here's where John Philip Nichols enters. Okay, so he was born in 1925. This guy could literally remember World War II. He was a financial officer or advisor, and he played a critical role in establishing gaming and cigarette sales on this small, impoverished community of Cabazon. In 1978, as a protected reservation, the sovereign land was tax exempt from the sales and gaming. And Wackenhut, it, it operated there, free of laws that only miles away they may or may not have been violating. So John Philip Nichols, we're going to call him JPN, he worked closely with the tribe's leader, Fred Alvarez, whom we're going to call Fred. And while sales and visits to the card room and the sales of the cigarettes skyrocketed, the community wasn't gaining any financial relief. And it was raising the question, was JPN a good guy or a bad guy? Like, he brought these in, but we're not getting any return on our labor, our time investment. So, I mean, I don't know if the existence of good or bad guy actually exists. I think the concept is a unicorn in our ideology. In this world, it seems that there are halls of power, and the powerless are not permitted entry. Now, first of all, okay, who better to teach anyone how to run a card room and casinos as it be other than like the founders, right? Which would be kind of organized crime players. I mean, Las Vegas was built on their intelligence. Why not these up and coming casinos on tax exempt sovereign land? Just saying. Now, in my last article, in my last post, Jeffrey Epstein's Ring of Organized Crime, we discussed Whitney Webb's book series titled One Nation Under Blackmail, that goes over how these three lettered agencies were founded and or relied upon organized crime. And the reason I bring that up the reason that I bring up past deep dives and books and stuff that I've read, documentaries and stuff, is it's because the world that exists within this web is so intertwined and the patterns run so vast that you can't actually comprehend it from a single article or a single discussion. Nor could we really, I certainly can't digest it all in its fullness in a single setting. So, with all we've gone over and all we've learned, we're really just skimming the top. And so, throughout this series, I do refer to other videos and other Substack articles, just to retouch base and say, remember, we talked about this, and this goes with this, and this touches on this. And there are some avenues that I don't even go down. I go down, but I'm not gonna. I'm not touching those conspiracy theories. Anyway, so let's go back to Fred. So essentially, Fred and JPN, they'd been working hard with the promise that the community who was doing all of the work would reap some of the rewards for their efforts. But there was no reward. There was empty promises for next year, and then again next year, and so on it went. And they never got any financial relief. All they got was more work and more exploitation. So Fred was getting like fed up with this blatant exploitation, and he sought legal counsel. And the tribe was stuck between a rock and racism here. Okay, so Fred, acting on the legal advice of his counsel, who said, "Hey, you need evidence, you need proof." So Fred took it upon himself to break in and take some of JPN's files, not knowing what the heck he was going to find, right? Well, yeah, Fred found himself in possession of top secret government files that had been stored on this sovereign land. I mean, what was Wackenhut even doing out there? Maybe developing bio and chemical weapons, maybe selling arms to foreign entities. Well, whatever it was, Fred was now in the know, and this information was only good for one side, the side of the three-letter agencies. Fred, you in danger. You in danger. In 1981, Fred and his two best friends, who were beloved and very valuable members of this community, they would be found executed, most likely by a known assailant. The top of the suspect list, yeah, of course it was JPN. But how could anyone prove it? Like I said, they were powerless. And as time would pass and time would tell, there would be no justice in this case of triple homicide. There was this security guard, Jay Hughes, and he claimed he dropped money for this hit on Fred before making his way out of the country and becoming a minister or whatever. He never faced charges or anything, but JPN would later be arrested for conspiracy to commit murder in a case that had absolutely no connection to Fred Alvarez. There was never any resolve or justice found in Fred Alvarez's case. On the reservation, the powers that be, they were testing their products. And there would be nightly meetings of groups and individuals testing and dealings in weapons and sharing secrets away from the lens of the law. And the only witness really to it all with any proof was now dead. But that still leaves the question, what was Wackenhut doing out there? So in 1980, Iran had taken some 66 Americans hostage when they seized the embassy in Tehran. And they were turned into the whole situation was turned into this political show in order to sway votes. As Ronald, sorry, I'm going to turn that mister off. It makes the most awful noise when it runs out of water. But it's the greatest little mister. I totally got it on TikTok Shop. You can find it in my showcase if you want to jump over there. It's one of the few ways to actually make money on social media. Anyway, shameless self promotion. What is wrong with me? So in the 80s, these American hostages, they were being used to sway votes. As Ronald Reagan's team, they suspected that Jimmy Carter was going to wait until the last minute to arrange for these hostages' release in order to gain votes, right? In response, Ronald Reagan's team covertly negotiated with Iran's leader. The release of the hostages moments after Ronald Reagan's inauguration would fuel the flames of this conspiracy theory. Ronald Reagan, he neither confirmed nor denied these allegations that, oh yeah, we totally met covertly with Iranian leaders before we were in office and made promises if we got in office. This is what we were going to do. So don't listen to Jimmy Carter because we don't want him to win. Right. Okay, so what does this have to do with the goings on the reservation? Well, Reagan won the presidency. Okay. In the 1980s, under Ronald Reagan's leadership, senior officials facilitated the sales of weapons in Iran illegally without the knowledge of Congress to fund the Contra rebel group in Nicaragua, beginning with the Arms for Hostage deal. By the way of sales of anti-tank and anti-aircraft missiles to the Islamic Republic of Iran to secure the hostages being held in Lebanon by the Hezbollah. Now, this directly contradicted Reagan's promises to never negotiate with terrorists. Tell me lies. Tell me sweet little lies. So in Nicaragua, the right-winged rebel group, the Contras, they were fighting to stop the Sandinista government. Reagan's Congress passed the Boland Amendment, which legally banned the U.S. government for providing military aid to the rebel group after reports of severe human rights abuse. surfaced. So, to bypass Congress, the NSC's Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North decided to overcharge Iran for weapons and funnel the surplus of funds that was in the millions of dollars to the Contras. In 1986, the operation would be brought to light when a plane carrying the supplies was shot down over Nicaragua, and this would become known as the Iran-Contra affair. In addition to the reservation possibly being a meeting place for these backdoor deals to take place, another location, and it most likely was. I think a lot of these weapons were tested and sold on the reservation, and I think that's a big part of what Wackenhut was doing. Can I prove it? No. But in addition to the reservation, there was another location known as Mina International Municipal Airport. We're just going to call it Mina, aka, oh, there's a little typo. Okay, aka, this was a place that was utilized for trafficking to the CIA and covert arming of the rebels during the Iran-Contra affair. This airport specifically would come under scrutiny after Barry Seal, a pilot, had used the facility to fly weapons out and then fly drugs back. Jeffrey Epstein, he begins to show his ugly face in halls of power around this time. Mutual friends claim that Epstein had met Ghislaine Maxwell, the daughter of the presumed member of Israeli intelligence, who we will get into in later articles, later posts. Ghislaine Maxwell, who eventually obviously became Jeffrey Epstein's partner in the history's largest sex trafficking ring that spanned the globe, pretty much with the exception of China. So there is a middleman in the Iran-Contra sales and transport, and his name was Adnan Khashoggi. You may have heard of him. He was a Saudi billionaire who facilitated shipments from Israel to Iran. Jeffrey Epstein worked closely with and considered Khashoggi to be a mentor, and a friend. In the 1980s, Khashoggi would become Jeffrey Epstein's first client as his career as a financier would take off. Jeffrey also, he cozied up to Stanley Poitier with the DOJ, who was also involved with the shipment of weapons, as well as Douglas Lassie, who was a British arms dealer. Later, Jeffrey Epstein would work alongside weapons traffickers and help to repurpose a CIA plane that was used in the Iran-Contra affair. That would later be sold to Les Wexner, who's also a co-conspirator and sex trafficker and the founder of L Brands. Boycott L Brands. Like, seriously, boycott L Brands. Anyway, so this plane would become part of L Brands' supply chain. In 2011, Epstein's Lost team filed a FOIA request for the CIA records that might have shown any connection from Jeffrey Epstein to the CIA during this time period, right? The request was denied under the pretense that it could not verify the existence or non-existence of any files in relation to a protective status, meaning that any information that the CIA would have on Jeffrey Epstein concerning Iran-Contra was protected. In 2017, Nancy Mace demanded the CIA acknowledge any existence of said files using EFTA 01602914, EFTA 02380288, and EFTA 01082913 as the supporting reasoning for the request. Some of the files mentioned say things like, it looks like a CIA drop. I don't know what he's talking about. Do you? Nancy Mace wanted to know. Doesn't make her a good person. 2010, the DEA and the OC Drug Enforcement Task Force probed Jeffrey Epstein and examined his finances and wire transfers after an informant had said that Jeffrey Epstein was distributing party drugs, including things I probably am not allowed to say on here, but controlled substances. And when he was arrested in 2019, the SDNY said, wait, what? What? We had no idea. Kind of sounds like they could have used PROMIS. So, I mean, other than the whole Iran Contra thing, there's no direct evidence that links Jeffrey Epstein to Mena International Municipal Airport. Mena would be brought under scrutiny again after being involved with Iran Contra. They would be brought under scrutiny again only a year after the investigation when two boys were murdered and left on train tracks after witnessing a low-flying plane drop that was suspected to be large quantities of. This case is known as the Boys on the Tracks, and it's been the subject of many documentaries and deep dives. And while the murders of the two teenagers remains unsolved, it's believed that the smuggling operation had direct connections to the local PD, the higher ups in government, including the medical examiner and even the governor at the time, Bill Clinton. So Bill Clinton, he's had no less than 3 accusations from sexual harassment to rape, and was close friends with Jeffrey Epstein. Bill Clinton denied the closeness, however, like they all do. The two men took multiple trips to Africa together. Jeffrey Epstein donated to Bill Clinton's campaign and visited the White House multiple times during Bill Clinton's presidency from 91 to 2000 or 93 to 2001. 1982 on Kearny Street, San Francisco, California, after a secret tip, the corpse of a man named Paul Maraska, who we're going to call Paul, he was found hogtied. Paul and MR, remember we were talking about MR earlier, they had been childhood friends and they remained so up until the time of Paul's death. Paul's girlfriend reported that Paul had been paranoid and afraid that the CIA and the FBI had been watching him. Why would the CIA and the FBI be watching him? I don't know. Could it be because his BFF is down there in SoCal breaking into or creating backdoors for Central Intelligence Agencies and dealing in weapons for Iran Contra? Maybe he told his friend all this, and I don't know. Maybe he was just paranoid. But investigators found reasons to believe that this man, Philip Arthur Thompson, who we're going to call Pat, Pat was a person of interest in Paul's death, and actually the lead suspect into Paul's murder. So when the detective attempted to find more on Pat's background, he found a series of major crimes while serving little to no time. And as it would come to be, he wasn't going to serve any time in Pat's murder either. Actually, he never went down for Pat's murder. All because Pat was an FBI CIA informant. Okay, I can see maybe getting some favors and some leeway for being informant, but let's talk about Pat. So, Pat was hired to be MR's bodyguard on the reservation, and he was receiving around $10,000 a month for his services. And he was, at this time, an FBI CIA informant, but MR, Whack, and Hutt, all of them, they didn't know that, right? So what was going on there? I mean, was he a handler? Was he there to keep an eye on the goings on and reporting back to the CIA? I don't know. But listen, what I found information on this affront to humanity really hard to come by. I don't know if it's because maybe all of this happened before things were digitized, but it did happen during the golden age of serial killers. And so many of their stories have lasted, but Pat's is told in bits and pieces from here and there. It's really hard to put together. Even when I was searching, I couldn't find out where he's in prison. I couldn't find out if he's dead or alive. All of these reports were mixed up. Everything I could find were from really old newspaper articles and some suggestions. So let's get into it. I did find one really amazing deep dive on YouTube by a creator named the Psych History Show. Some people think this is an AI um, account. I don't know if it's AI or not. I know that this deep dive was amazing, and I did check out the sources that were shown in it, and that was really how I ended up gathering information. I'm not going to go completely into Pat's story, but if you want more, definitely go check out that post by, what did I say? The Psych History Show. Pat was the son of a police officer born 8/5, 1945. He stood 6'4" and weighed 190 pounds. He wore Agent Orange scars on his knees from the time he was in the Vietnam War as a part of the Phoenix program designed by the CIA. The Vietnam War lasted from 1955 to 1975, escalated in 1965. In 1973, the U.S. forces withdrew, culminating in the fall of Saigon in 1975. Agent Orange was a chemical weapon used from 1962 to 1971, where 1 million gallons would crop dust areas as a part of an operation called Operation Ranch Hand. However, Congress had never actually declared war on Vietnam, despite the U.S. deploying thousands of troops and using chemical warfare. From 1967 to 1972, the Phoenix program's goal was to neutralize the Viet Cong through intelligence gathering, neutralization, and participation. They neutralized over 81,000 people, which approximately half of those people died as a result. The Phoenix program became synonymous with severe human rights violations and atrocities through systematic torture, extrajudicial killings, and corruption. This conflict changed the public perception due to the heavy, uncensored presence of the media. The visuals of the cost to human life were streamed into people's homes daily, leaving them unable to look away, and raised questions of what the government was not telling us and why. This would ultimately fuel the anti war efforts that coincided with the civil rights movement, women's suffrage, and pride. But hey, we got some good music out of it, I guess. After the war, Pat did some time and some side jobs. In 1984-85, Pat had served as a driver for Ronald Reagan, who used ex-CIA officers often during his second campaign for POTUS. But don't be impressed. This guy has a rap sheet longer than this article, including murder, robbery, running guns, and trafficking drugs. In one case, he had killed a man to keep him from talking about robbing an Air Force base outside of Sacramento, California, United States. And while he was indicted for the crime, the case was squashed and Pat walked free. So, Pat also ran a ring, much like the Iran-Contra affair, trading drugs for guns and vice versa. It was much like the operations conducted by the CIA that moved up to 15 kilos of cocaine per week, thus leading to the crack epidemic in South Central LA, where some of the most prolific and rarely talked about serial killers operated. One of them being the Grim Sleeper, who targeted users of the drug between 1988 and 2002. Lonnie David would be convicted of 10 murders. The police refused to investigate the dumped bodies of his victims and even had survivors describe his car and name the street he lived on. Because, in the words of those who took an oath to protect and serve, this guy was doing them a favor. And then there was Chester Turner under the same MO and not far in proximity, who killed 14 women during the 1980s and 1990s. Life would provide Pat with more accusations and fewer jail cells. Like, he did 18 months for murder. And sometimes he would walk free due to FBI intervention. Why? Pat was actually a suspect in the Zodiac case and the case of the Santa Rosa Hitchhike murders, which was a series of 7 unsolved homicides in Sonoma County from 1972 through 1973, where girls as young as 12 and up to 23 all were last seen hitchhiking and later found nude and deposited down embankments or creek beds. Some could only be identified by their jewelry. Pat was a suspect in the Zodiac case, in part due to his proximity to the crimes and the 1971 rape and murder of Betty Kohler in California, whom was found naked in a field and at one time was believed to be a Zodiac victim. In 1980, Valerie McDonald was lured from her apartment where Pat worked in management. With the promises of an acting gig, they lured her out. Her partial remains would be found in 2001 in Ferry County, Washington. It is believed that she had been held strapped to a mattress in a warehouse for 10 days leading to her death. Connections to Pat and his two buddies, like her belongings found on his friends, linked him to the crime. He would eventually be sentenced to 2 life terms in 1983. How could he be sentenced to 2 life terms in 83 and then drive for Ronald in 84? See, there's not a lot of his story that really adds up. Anyway, he was convicted for to 2 life sentences for, get this, robbing what was it, UPS trucks? Yeah, UPS trucks, 2 of them, out of desire for Christmas gifts of all things. Yeah, I guess there was kidnapping and some other shit involved in these 2 robberies because he did receive 2 life sentences. I guess by that point, the FBI was sick of wrangling him. I don't know. Anyway, in 2008, he would be convicted by way of DNA left on Betty Kohler, who ensured that this sick fuck would never see the light of free life again. The cherry on the cake is that his life with the CIA and FBI were used against him in her case's trial. It's always the women. It's always the women who remain the heroes. It's the women who, even from beyond the grave, demand justice and remembrance. These women are our heroes. We need to start believing and listening to them. Just say. So where's Pat today? I don't know. Like I said, I don't know. Maybe Drill Track could help, right? Um, Some pages report that he's passed, others say he died in 2020 behind bars, and others say he remains incarcerated. I couldn't find where he's being held. If anybody knows who I'm talking about, because this is a person that's not regularly talked about in the true crime circles. And he was like even though he was convicted in Betty's case, outside of that, we don't talk about all of his other F shit. You know what I'm saying? Um, so if you know where he is today, is he dead? Is he alive? Has he ever talked out about why he got away with all this stuff? There's a conspiracy theory out there that revolves around MK Ultra and the golden age of serial killers. This guy was clearly a serial killer, even if he wasn't the Santa Rosa hitchhiker murderer or the Zodiac. He killed multiple women. He killed multiple people. Um, he was convicted for multiple murders. Right? He was a serial killer, um, and he was in the CIA, and he was a part of the Phoenix program. So there's a theory going around that the MK Ultra program is a part of the reason that the golden age of serial killers happened. Just to put that in context for you, the golden age is where approximately 700 active serial killers were active in a decade, whereas nowadays we're around like 50 serial killers might be active in the United States in a decade. So it's a massive jump. And the theory is that these horrific things that are not unlike the tactics used in the Phoenix program um, led to these people being serial killers. Um, and it makes me wonder: did Pat get so much leeway to just run a menace um, on the streets and be a full-on danger to society? Was he allowed to get away with that for so long? Not because he was an informant, but maybe it's because he didn't know about the Iran Contra affair. Maybe it was because he was the CIA had hired him to take out hits on people. Could it be just maybe um, he was a subject, either willingly or unwillingly, to the MK Ultra experiments, and they were keeping an eye on him as a part of data collection for the experiments that were run on him. I mean, I guess we're never going to know. All those documents, all but 7 boxes, were completely destroyed. We're never going to know, right? It's just a conspiracy theory. But either way, I do find it very suspicious how difficult it was to. I mean, usually people like this, particularly from back in the day, it's pretty easy to find information on. And I had to do some serious diving to get what I got. And it just seems suspicious to me that even today, there seems to be some sort of, I don't know, cover up to his name, some washing over, maybe some residual washing over to who this man really was within the CIA. But there's a pattern there, right? Like, why do our 3-letter agencies let this guy get away with all that and more? What did he have to offer the CIA and the FBI? What did Jeffrey Epstein have to offer for him to be able to land that sweetheart deal? Um, Blackmail? Intel that's one day going to be obsolete? A dirty deeds done dirt cheap? I don't know. What is worth the loss of the lives, the theft of the innocence? And no matter how much I search, I may never understand the fundamental differences between us and them. Us, everyday regular people, and those who wander the halls of power. In the aftermath of his friend's brutal slaying, MR was left feeling in a whole myriad of ways, as you can imagine. Grief, guilt, despair, fear. I mean, what was he going to do? He was tangled in a world where 3-letter agencies were controlling his life and exploiting his intelligence. They had the power to silence people or send them to the grave, with the generalized public only beginning to realize that most conspiracy theories did not stem from a convoluted mind, but maybe, just maybe, there was a little bit of elements of truth to them. Some of them. But which ones? And who could we believe? And could we trust the government? And why would they do that? Why would we believe that the theorists and the lies, why would we believe them when the lies we're given are candy coated in innocence, making them easy to swallow and filling our bellies with comfort and ease as we sleep? I mean, you know what they say, ignorance is bliss. But MR, he wanted to speak out, sign affidavits and all, but nobody believed him, especially after the DEA got him. So during the war on drugs era, this guy, even for those times, his sentencing would be harsh. In 1991, he was arrested on federal drug charges and convicted of conspiring to distribute. He sat in prison until 2017. Here we are in the Big 2-6, 7 years after Jeffrey Epstein's arrest. On August 10th, 1991, at the Sheraton Hotel in Martinsburg, West Virginia, bloody handprints smeared across the walls. In a bloodbath lie the corpse of Danny Castillo, whom we're going to call Danny. His death was ruled self-inflicted and the crime scene cleaned before his family was notified. The writer and investigative journalist had told family just weeks prior, if something happens to me, I didn't do it. Not unlike the deceased scientists or some of the missing and deceased Jeffrey Epstein and associate accusers. His manner of death became highly contested for a multitude of reasons. Firstly, how could he inflict so many deep lacerations on each wrist once his tendons had been severed? Valid question. And also, why would he begin to slash before he reached the tub? Why is there handprints smeared all over the wall? That's not suspicious at all. The whole thing was suspicious just from the gate, okay? Now, Danny had spent the last year of his life investigating the conspiracy stemming from that Inslaw case. Janet Reno, the first woman to serve as the U.S. Attorney General from 1993 to 2001 under then POTUS Bill Clinton, formally investigated the Inslaw affair. In 93, she released the BOA report, which concluded there was no credible evidence that the DOJ had stolen PROMIS or was complicit in Danny's death, despite Danny's brother claiming that Janet Reno had shared that numerous FBI agents had disagreed with the official conclusion of self-infliction. They stated the reason being that Danny was distraught because he had spent a year of his life working on a book that no publisher would touch without solid proof, of which he had none. MR had told Danny that before his DEA arrest, he had recorded triple letter agencies threatening him in various ways. Danny spent a week searching Puget Sound for the tapes to no avail, leaving Danny feeling like he had been lied to or conned. I mean, all of his investigative work had stemmed from MR's word about PROMIS. The DOJ had filed a FOIA request into the federal investigation. Now, Danny's FOIA files from the state investigation revealed a long list of paperwork. But gone was Danny's briefcase containing all his work on the Inslot case that he had always carried with him. What was found was a box filled with papers, amongst them a witness report that had previously been excluded from the investigation that contradicted the police report that said Danny was alone in his hotel room. A witness, his neighbor in the hotel room, said she had seen him with a dark-haired man, and she even provided a police sketch. Now, the sketch resembled a serviceman that Danny had been in contact with, a man who told Danny he could help fill in some blanks in Danny's story. And indeed, Danny had said he was going to this hotel to meet with an informant. The informant was a man Danny had met in a bar by chance. And by all accounts, this guy was an all-American hero, a man by the name of Culler. Cullar. And he had a specialty in the military. It had been extracting information and working in the field of psychic warfare. Now, there would be two alibis given for Culler's whereabouts the night Danny died. One said that he was in D.C., while the other said he was in Panama. Oh, yeah, could that be spotty police work? Sure. True crime girlies, you already know. You already know. I don't always trust the cops, right? Like, sometimes they don't give their all. But I find it interesting that this serviceman has specialized basically in the art of the mind. Um, I mean, this entire web of lies and deceit is a giant mind fuck. MR told secret truths mixed with stories unproven. Jeffrey Epstein used the mindfuck tactic in his acts of crimes against humanity. Now, what am I talking about? Is this just saying no? A mindfuck tactic is a manipulation method used to disrupt perception, logic, or emotional stability. Operation Mindfuck is a concept involving dispersing deliberate misinformation or absurdities into public discourse to shatter rigid opinions and force people to critically question authority, including but not limited to psychological operations, psyops, the word we hear quite a bit these days. And in the military, these tactics can include sleep deprivation, high volume noise, false flags, and shock and awe. In addition to the mindfuck tactic, there's a term that we use quite often. It's called tainting the whale. Well, W-E-L-L, not whale, like W-H-A-L. Now, we saw it really with like the Steele dossier that was written by Christopher Steele, a counterintelligence specialist in 2016 that contained allegations of misconduct, conspiracy, and cooperation between Donald Trump's campaign and Russian officials. That's another topic that comes up repeatedly within the DOJ files. And when we do deep dives into Jeffrey Epstein, it's that 2016 Russian conspiracy using Facebook mainly to influence the way people vote. And we're going to get into that in my next deep dive too. So these BS files have been placed into the Steele dossier that were easily disproven, thus calling into question the credibility of the entirety of the report. And that's what we call tainting the whale. And I have that's my accent. Well, and I have no doubt that the Epstein files contain a lot of that kind of same tainted whale theory in practice. Um, I don't believe everything I read in there, particularly when it comes to some of the accusations. I think there could have been false tips, false claims, either called in or placed in there by officials. I don't know. None of them are being investigated, so I guess none of us are ever gonna know, um, unless down the road a different administration than the last five administrations says, "Hey, let's actually look into this shit. Let's get some answers. Let's call for justice." I don't know. I don't see it happening. Anyway, in Danny's investigation, some of the intentional misinformation could have come from MR himself, like the fictional tapes that Danny exhaustively searched for. Does that mean everything he said was bullshit? Does that mean everything he said was a lie? The government's not going to tell us, you know, with everything we know from the Iran Contra affair, that's the extent of what we're going to know about what was going on. But they still maintain that, nah, they never put a backdoor into PROMIS and they were never spying, um, ever. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in Robert Maxwell's alleged role that he played in the cell of PROMIS in the next deep dive that we do as well. So hang out for that. Might be a while though. I rarely get a lot around to recording. Like I said earlier, I really don't like it. But maybe jump over to my Substack and subscribe there because it will definitely be up there before it will be here on YouTube. Anyway, so there's a lot of other players, like I was saying about like Robert Maxwell and whatnot. Um, there's a lot of other players and a lot of other stuff going on, each with questionable information and connections to three-letter agencies, and there's lots of more victims. Again, this is a series. I'm trying to present it in bite-sized chunks. So we will be referring back to this much in the same way we refer back to other stories. Some of them are solely on YouTube before I started my Substack, and some are on both platforms. Anyway, um, people we probably won't mention again, but I think do deserve an honorable mention are like Jonathan Moyle, who was a journalist who had been following Danny's story. He was found hanging in a hotel room in Chile. There was Alan Stendorf, one of Danny's informants. He lost his right to life by way of a head injury. He was found in his car. Danny has friends that intend on honoring his legacy by completing Danny's book titled The Octopus. I, for one, will definitely be on the lookout for it and read it if it ever drops. But let's talk about MR. Is this all bullshit? No, it's Iran Contra is not. The boys on the track is not. Um, Fred actually died. Phil actually died. There were things that actually happened that MR gave reasonable accounts as to why. He also spilled a lot of bullshit. So, is it conspiracy? Is it fact? Is it a little bit of both? I mean, maybe MR simply has a flair for the dramatic and poses the ability to tell a fantastic tale, tainted and fucked as it may be. However, when we examine the pattern of offenses and tactics behind all the cases, from the boys on the tracks to the Iran Contra affair, to Jeffrey Epstein, to the octopus, to the missing and dead scientists, among many others, a pattern emerges, right? It emerges from the depths, glaring and white, reflecting over a sea of darkness, leaving us with the inability to continue to believe. The government wouldn't do that. Until next time, remember, you're valid, you're worthy, you're loved. Oh, by the way, I keep mentioning my Substack. If you want the sources, um, not all of them. Sometimes I get so wrapped up I forget to write them down. But most of them, my sources will be on my Substack, Genevieve Gravel. Also, there is a Substack up that's going to be a Substack exclusive titled Silent Screams. It's not behind a paywall. Go check it out if there's not going to be a video on that one. And look out for my next episode. Okay, love you. Bye.